Welcome to another episode of the Executive Code Podcast. You're very welcome to the Executive Code Podcast, where we talk about everything to do with personal mastery. So if you're new to the podcast, that's what we talk about. Everything to do from life purpose through to personal mastery. If you're a regular listener to our podcast, why not give us a review on Apple iTunes, or preferably a 5-star review would be absolutely helpful. And the reason being because what it's going to do is it's going to help us share a message out there in the world. So I've got a very special guest on the show here today. We were just chatting beforehand, before we press record, and I think we were trying to recall back as regards to how we came across each other a number of years ago. And I'm saying it is actually a few years ago. So, but let me give you the formal introduction. Dr. Jude Currivan is a cosmologist, planetary healer, futurist and author, latterly of the Cosmic Hologram and the Story of Gaia. Previously a senior international businesswoman, she's a member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle and co-founder of Whole World View. She holds a Ph.D. in Archaeology and a master's degree from Oxford University, specializing in cosmology and quantum physics, and integrates leading-edge science and universal wisdom teachings, aiming to serve conscious evolution. Jude, you're very welcome, and thank you for being on the Executive Code Podcast.
Paul, it's great to be with you again, because we figured that we did meet at some point. So it's lovely to be with you again, many years later.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's how the universe works, so you never know.
Absolutely.
There's so much I want to ask you, Jude, because there is so much wisdom that you can share with the listeners. So let's see how much we can actually get through while we have this time together. But just to give our listeners a bit of a synopsis of yourself on your journey and what led you to studying cosmology and quantum physics.
Well, it's been a scenic path. It's been as you know, it's been a scenic path for the whole of my life, because when I was very young, at the age of 4, in fact, I started to have what we sometimes call supernormal experiences. So I was having conversations with discarnate voices and remote viewing. I didn't know that it was called that at the time, of course. And I was having too much fun to, other than experience it. But that sort of experience of the nature of reality as a much grander, so multidimensional expression of the cosmos has been my whole lifelong path. So when I was 18, I went to Oxford University, very absolutely fascinated, not just by what I was experiencing in that way, but how that expanded realities became what we call our universe. So I've looked out to the stars since I was very small. I wanted to see how our universe seemed to come into its appearance and its reality at its smallest scales, hence quantum physics, and its largest scales, hence cosmology. So I did that, but what I realized was that the science I was being taught was really a very limited perspective on the realities that I was experiencing. So
Yes.
my whole life on an ongoing basis is really to bring leading edge science together with universal wisdom teachings, which offer so much profound insights into ourselves and the nature of reality. And they are now converging. So I think it's an incredibly exciting time that where science and spirituality, wisdom teachings, and the deeper nature of our understanding of reality is really now emergent. So that's been a lifelong. Oh, and by the way, I went into corporate life for 25 years, became an accountant, and ended up being the finance director of 2 $500 million businesses in 36 countries. That was part of it.
So we're actually both accountants by background.
Yeah, we've both been there, done that, bought the t-shirt.
Yeah, so we come from the logical side, the process and the system side, as well as the what people would refer to as being maybe perhaps the woo-woo side, and that this complete super consciousness side of things. So it's a phenomenal combination.
It's been a wonderful journey, and it's an ongoing journey, because as you know, we're all on that continuing journey. So every day I'm still curious. I want to understand more, but also experience more and embody more of what I'm finding, which is the ultimately unified nature of reality.
Yeah, perfect. Which leads us into, because I want to take it from your bio. which leads, because I want to give a grounding for people to understand your background and the work that you do, before we dive deep into understanding the main core subject matter that we're here to talk about. So the Evolutionary Leaders Circle.
Mhm.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, that was set up, getting on for 20 years ago, by people like Deepak Chopra, Jean Houston, Irving Laszlo, Lynn McTaggart, and others, who were all of them leaders and pioneers in the body, mind, spirit movement and the personal development movement. And since then, that circle of basically serving the conscious evolution of humanity has continued to grow. And I was invited in about 8 years ago, maybe a bit more. And we've continued to grow, and we've continued ever more now to link up and lift up together to serve conscious evolution. And a couple of years ago, as an action-based collaborations, we formed a number of so-called synergy circles where we came together to focus on certain aspects of what conscious evolution might look like, might feel like, might be. And those include conscious business, education, how science and spirituality are coming together, how we might bring an evolutionary, which means essentially unitive approach to, for example, the work of the United Nations and the SDGs. So it spreads across everything basically, because it's turning our old paradigm of materialism and separation into what is emerging with scientific evidence, into the realization that we are literally inseparable from a universe that itself exists and evolves as a unified whole.
Yeah, which is excellent, because it's actually going to lead me into my next question, because I want listeners to really understand this before we actually dive deep, because there's a term in your bio which is Gaia, and
Yes.
some listeners will be familiar with that terminology, others won't be familiar with it. So for our listeners, what does Gaia mean for you?
Well, what Gaia means to me, I need to go back probably 2,500 years because, just away. Because Gaia was the name that the ancient Greeks gave to the earth goddess. And they perceived her, as they did all the archetypal gods and goddesses of their worldview, as sentient, as aspects of consciousness. So that name then continued through until a number of decades ago, when a scientific pioneer called James Lovelock wrote a book about the Gaia hypothesis. And James was basically a planetary scientist, an incredible innovator. And what he realized is that the entirety of our planetary home is an interdependent being. Her rocks, her minerals are interdependent with her waters, with her atmosphere, with her biosphere, which is all her biological ecosystems, and us, of course. So he came up with a Gaia hypothesis that over time he expanded on, and many, many others have come to understand and appreciate and research in their own way. I use the word Gaia now to take that even on further, because as a cosmologist, but also with many different hats on and many sort of areas of science that I'm fascinated by, I'm sort of bringing together the latest evidence that in fact our entire universe exists and evolves, not just as an interdependent entity, but as an ultimately unified entity. And where mind and consciousness aren't something that have evolved or that we have, but literally what we and the whole world are. So when I describe Gaia, I describe her as a sentient, evolving planetary home within a sentient and evolving unified universe.
Perfect. And when people use the terminology universe, higher power, higher mind, God, superconscious, that's all within the one definition that you've given of Gaia.
Yes and no, because I as a cosmologist, the appearance of our universe, its energy and matter and space and time, we're now understanding from, of all things, studies of black holes, that our appearance of our universe is not its fundamental reality. Instead, it emerges from deeper levels of non-physical causation. And it does so being pervaded by, imbued by meaningful information. So we're now coming forward with an emergent cosmology of a meaningfully informed, and just for fun, I'll throw in the holographic manifestation of our universe, that of itself is essentially a great thought, a great consciousness, a great conscious thought of an infinite and eternal cosmos. So when we talk about higher purpose, we often are describing the supra-physical aspects of a whole piano keyboard of consciousness, as my friend Elizabeth Sartorius, the evolutionary biologist, describes it as.
Okay. And let's start diving deep. In terms of, so as you said, science is now getting to prove that we're all connected, that we're
even more than that, even more than we're connected or we're interdependent, that we literally are inseparable. What I really want to stress, Paul, is that unity is not uniformity.
Yeah,
it is radical diversity, but it is, you know, we know now, we have cosmological evidence from studies of the patterns in what's called the cosmic microwave background of a holographic universe. We have experiments done to show that the entire universe is what's non-locally unified. And we can talk about those, they're in my book. But you know, this is evidentially based. This is not ideas as such.
Explain for us the holographic universe.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll go back another 2,500 years, actually, because there's a beautiful analogy that Plato, the Greek philosopher, talked about, and it's called the cave analogy. And he talks about what we see as our reality is actually a shadow of consciousness shining on the cave. And in a way, when you think about our technology of holograms, you know, we shine a light beam on an object, we gather information as it's beamed back, we put all of that information on a two-dimensional pattern, and then we shine another light through it, and a hologram, a three-dimensional appearance of a hologram of that original object comes forward. Even ABBA, my favorite band, are now doing a holographic performance. So it's extraordinary how that technology has become mainstream for us. But as cosmologists studying black holes, the question we asked is, well, what happens when a massive star at the end of its life runs out of fuel and collapses gravitationally? And as it does so, it's so big that it just carries on collapsing to a point that even light can't escape. The gravitational power force is so strong. So what it does is it collapses inside what we call an event horizon, which is the spherical area around the star at that point where even light can't escape, and the collapse continues. That's what we call a black hole. But when we ask the question, well, what happens to all that information of the star, we found something extraordinary. Because intuitively, we'd expect that the information of that star will be proportional to the volume, the three-dimensional volume of the black hole. And it's not. It's proportional to the two-dimensional surface area of its event horizon. So some clever folks went, okay. And we have very great evidence now that this is the case. They took that perception to the entirety of our universe to postulate that the appearance of our universe, the appearance of our entire universe is a holographic projection from the boundary of what we call space-time. So the appearance of our universe is a holographic projection and also emerges from deeper levels of intelligence and causation as meaningfully informed.
Okay.
That is mind-blowing. I know it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, So that's going to take me a while to get around.
Well, not just you. Cosmologists going, what the? There's a recent article in New Scientist with Professor Brian Cox and Professor Jeff Forshaw, just coming out a book that's starting to talk about this. And the lead quote is, we know space-time emerges from something deeper, but in their perspective, they don't yet know what, because you can't say that without being on a very slippery slope.
Yeah.
To the consciousness nature of reality.
Yeah. So let's bring it then to everybody living their life right now at the moment.
Sure.
And to be living in interconnected, in unity with everything and everyone.
Yeah.
That's a very, very different conscious way of thinking compared to how we have been living for the vast majority of decades, of how people have been living in terms of living their own life, living, okay, they may perceive it and see it as being, they're living within their family unit, but they're kind of separate. And even within the family unit, they're still separate. To understanding how we are all interconnected and living in unity. How does somebody make that transition? Because I suppose I'm asking the question in terms of, for our listeners going through life right now at the moment, how do they make that shift?
It's the fundamental question, isn't it? It's the ultimate choice of our times. It really is. And it is our personal choice and it's our collective choice. Because just to sort of, again, just take a step back, you know, we were taught at school that our universe is solely materialistic. It's made up of separate things, that consciousness somehow arises from the material brain after long periods of random evolution. That is now completely being turned on its head. And it's being turned on its head by the best tradition of science, in that it follows the evidence wherever it may lead. Yeah. And believe you me, a lot of scientists are tearing their hair out as what the implications are, because the implications are not just a change or even a revolution in our scientific understanding of the world. They completely turn around who we are, how we see ourselves, who we are really. They help us remember what perhaps in ancient times we actually felt and experienced and knew. And we've moved away from that and learned many, many things in that journey. But now we're at an unsustainable point, because we're at a point where that paradigm of materialist separation has literally brought us to the edge of catastrophe, both as a species and potentially as a planetary home. And, you know, I describe this as a dis-ease of separation. And what it does is, you know, separation, a worldview of separation essentially drives a world of suffering. Because it does say we are separate from everything. So what this is doing is it's showing us the evidence. So hopefully, if we're open to it, we can choose for ourselves. We can follow the evidence for ourselves. We can make our own minds up as to what we understand and what we agree with or not. It's an invitation. It's not an imposition. So it's laying out the evidence that this is the emergent understanding of reality. And then it almost brings it back to us. What is our choice? Because if I'm open to this, it really invites us on a journey to not just outer discovery, but inner discovery. And this is where you really are with your work and service, because it's how do we then, from that inner to outer, step by step, open ourselves up to what could be, for many people, a radical new view of reality. But some folks, and many, many more folks now, are already on this path. Many, when we have this conversation, I knew that all the time. I don't need the evidence, I knew it anyway. But for me, it's this convergence. And, you know, facts and evidence don't necessarily change people. Feelings do, emotions do. So when I wrote the story of Gaia, which is just coming out, or the book Wrote Me, I would invite readers to take a journey with Gaia as our planetary home, and a planetary home who is herself existing and evolving in a universe that is also evolving And that comes us back to your point around us as evolving humanity, because then I think people will begin to feel a deeper relationship with Gaia.
Yeah. It's an exploration. It starts with a question, as you say. It starts with a question, and it's a choice, and it's exploring.
Yes, it really is. And that path of exploration is different for everyone, and yet it's a great superhighway.
Yeah.
Potentially for our collective, for our species at this absolutely vital time.
Yeah. I speak to our listeners, our clients about, because, as I said at the very top of this podcast, we talk all about personal mastery and life purpose. And I describe that our overarching purpose in life is to be our genius self, to live life fully, to experience, to love, and to evolve. And then within that overarching purpose, we have a very specific, unique individual life purpose, which is the work that I've been doing for many, many years. And it's funny how you describe in terms of, it must be the accountant in both of us, that we have to see the evidence before we can actually put it forward,
To be fair, that is the back way for me, because I only became an accountant in my 20s. I'd experienced this since I was 4 years old.
Same.
So it's like, but I somehow within me, and I didn't know this, but I did feel that at some point, to be able to share it in a way that a lot of folks would be able to at least say yes to the possibility of this exploration, that the evidence is key. And I think this is potentially a game changer for many, many people. Yeah,
exactly. Talk to me, and the reason why I was referring to that was because, talk to me a little bit about the evolution of consciousness.
Yeah, well, let's go back. We've only gone back 2,500. Let's go for the whole Monty. Let's go back 13.8 billion years to the very beginning of our universe, that began a finite time. The cosmology is showing us more and more, and many, many other aspects of evidence at all scales, that our universe is a finite thought form within the infinite and eternal cosmic mind of God, of Great Spirit, of Allah, whatever term we choose with that understanding. But the best view we have is that our universe of space and time and energy matter began 13.8 billion years ago, not in the implied chaos of a big bang, because as I always say, it wasn't big and it wasn't a bang. We know, Fred Hoyle, when he coined the term, was being a little bit facetious, because we know it was minute. But the other thing that's really stuck is the idea of it being some sort of explosive, chaotic bang. And that is absolutely not the case. Our universe began in an incredibly ordered, exquisitely fine-tuned and relational basis. So from the very beginning, it embodied unity. It was unity. It was born as a unified possibility, a unified beginning to an ongoing big breath, as I talk about it, because the space has expanded ever since and time has flowed forward ever since. Our universe has evolved from simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity, diversity, interdependence, into being. So when we go back, it's innately conscious, innately mindful. And the consciousness, the cosmic consciousness that it expresses and manifests, does so as articulated as meaningful information, which makes up, from the smallest scale possible, that its pixelated scale to do this is as small as to an atom, as the atom is to the whole universe. You just get that in your head.
It's mind-blowing, yeah.
It literally, from that, what's called the Planck scale, all the appearance of energy, matter, and space-time emerges as people and planets and plants. So this whole evolutionary arc, from simplicity to complexity, has been essentially both meaningful and purposeful. So when we talk about us, just as we are a community, each of us, of 37 trillion cells, many of which aren't human, they're fungi and they're bacteria, they're viruses. In a sense, each of us is a cell of Gaia.
Yeah, yeah.
And each planet is and planetary system are cells within the entire universe. So there's this holarchic intelligence that scales up from the smallest to the whole universe. And we are, as you said, I describe us as microcosmic co-creators of our universe's meaning and evolutionary purpose.
So you've actually answered my next question, which but let's bring it closer for people to understand in terms of. So my question was, who are we and how do we actually fit into the conscious universe? And you've actually answered it in a lot of respects. But for somebody to really bring it home for themselves as they're listening to this, and they're asking that question in their own mind, who am I? And how do I fit in?
I think, who am I? I hope I answered, because we are meaningful, evolutionary purposeful microcosmic co-creators of a living, evolving universe and a living, evolving planetary home. So going back to what I said very earlier, we don't have mind and consciousness. We are mind and consciousness. We and the whole world are. So how do we fit in? When I co-founded Whole World View 5 years ago, when the cosmic hologram came out, a group of us were sort of sitting around going, what are we doing? What are we doing? And what is ours to do? And a big part of that was to sort of share this increasingly compelling evidence to understand unitive awareness, but also to help people into a journey of increasing experiencing and embodying of it. So that is, what can I do? Continue that journey, as I would describe as a homecoming to who we all really are. But also we came up with a sort of a strapline, which was act local, feel global, and think cosmic.
Nice one. Yeah.
Because it's that whole, that whole breathing in and breathing out. But if we just act local, it's very easy to stay in that paradigm, that old unsustainable paradigm of materialism and separation. So by certainly doing that, do what's in front of us, does all of the you guide, but then expand our circle of compassion to a we space, where the we space is our entirety of our planetary home, Gaia, and all her children. So feel that. So act local is the sort of the hands, as it were. The feeling global is the heart. And then the thinking cosmic recognizes and progressively makes real our being conscious, microcosmic co-creators of our entire universe.
Yeah. And it's even shifting our own terminology from I to we.
Me to we to all.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
How is Gaia fundamentally relevant for everyone right now?
Do you mean we could actually have this conversation if she wasn't?
I know.
I mean, what did you have for breakfast?
You don't want to know.
I probably don't want to know, but Gaia supplied that.
Exactly. Absolutely.
What about how you're breathing at the moment? Gaia supplied that. What about the ground you're standing on? Gaia supplied that. Everything. We are Gaia. At the end of the book, I invite us, and this is a term that my dear friend Michael Lindfield introduced me to see ourselves, to experience ourselves beyond being human beings as Gaians. So instead of perceiving Gaia or the earth out there,
as separate.
He lives in us, we live in her. And when we do that, as Michael so beautifully says, life meets life and knows itself to be one. Yeah.
Let's just let that drop just for a few seconds, because that is actually extremely profound, but it has for people to really let that sink.
Yeah.
Just to understand it. In your bio, you refer to being a futurist.
Yeah.
And people are going to be fascinated with this. Okay. So as a futurist, and we all know that we're in a period of transition right now at the moment. But as we move through the coming years, what is it that you feel this transition is going to be like for people? What lies ahead for people?
Well, I'm thinking of taking that term out of my bio, actually.
Too late.
Oh. I describe myself as an optimistic realist, a realistic optimist. I know where we're at. You know, when I was in corporate life up till the mid 1990s, and being finance director of those major companies, I walked away from all of that because I could sense, with all my journey until that point, what potentially was coming for us. The other reason was if I'd have had to do another strategic business plan, I'd have probably done something horrible to myself. So I had the push and the pull. I can't stand this anymore. But I had a wonderful time. I generally had a great time. But I did feel, with all my other sort of experiential ways of perceiving, that something was becoming progressively unsustainable. And that unless we were able as a species to move beyond a worldview of fragmentation and separation, that we would come to this point. So all the work that I've served since has been to try and help us to understand this, but not just from a point of, there's a massive existential problem and threat, but what is the emergence? What is the potential for us when we are able to sort of wake up from the illusion of separation, when we've got the evidence to show that it's an illusion? But more than that, we have the potential to empower and inspire all of us, and especially young people who are in desperate need of some authentic hope.
Yeah.
This offers authentic hope, not just woo-woo, not just, wouldn't it be lovely? This is not a fudge. This is a revelation of the fundamental nature of reality and who we are. And in doing that, and for all the people around the world who are serving, who are part of this waking up, and we all are, all are, because we're all part of the collective psyche, the collective consciousness of our species and Gaia. But the more of us that can perceive this, the more we can serve our brothers and sisters, the more we can serve our beloved planetary home. And then that's why the future can be something quite extraordinary. Because we're not just talking about our evolution, we're talking about our potentially becoming co-evolutionary partners with Gaia and the entire universe. That's a cool invitation.
Absolutely is. Yeah. Not just for our generation. It's beyond.
We are way, way beyond. Yeah.
What can people do right now to raise consciousness?
It begins with each of us. I mean, the most fundamental and the teaching known as the Golden Rule, I think, is vital for this. Because the teaching of the Golden Rule actually is telling us we're inseparable. When it invites us to treat others as we would wish to be treated, and there's another rule called the Platinum Rule, treat others as they would like to be treated. When you take those two precious metals together, it really does come from that fundamental unity and diversity. And to live our lives in that way, not just a day a week or an hour a day, but to literally embed that into the very way we live our lives is transformational.
It's to come to a point of love.
To come to a point of love and live as love, and to ask in every situation, what would love do? And then do it, however uncomfortable it is, do it.
Even it's easy for people to be in the space of love when things are going well and things are going right and everybody's happy and all that kinds of things. But it's actually part of our learning is actually how can we love in the challenging times?
Absolutely. And how can we love when, and how can we love in a way that sees all of us not as other,
Yeah.
but as aspects of the wholeness of who we are.
Yeah.
However, and I'm not talking about colluding with what is harmful behavior at all.
Mm.
But
Mm.
what I am saying is when we expand our circle of compassion, as Einstein also said, then we can include, and we can agree to differ. We can agree to disagree.
Mm.
Going back to unity is not uniformity, but how can we disagree in a way that is respectful, and a way that we can somehow find what joins us, what is common? Because I am absolutely of the view that despite all the noise and the hoo-ha, if you actually sat down in a room in circle, had a cup of tea and preferably a chocolate biscuit together, probably 80%, we'd agree on 80%, and we might differ on 20%, and we can figure ways of dealing with that 20%.
It's the first rule in negotiation. Let's put it that way. Find common ground.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Your new book, The Story of Gaia, The Big Breath and the Evolutionary Journey of Our Conscious Planet. Tell our listeners a little bit more about the book and why they should get a copy.
I think the title says it all, really.
Is the book out yet, Jude, is it?
It is in the States. It came out November the 1st in the States. It comes out in Europe on 8th of December, but it is on pre-order now. So you can certainly get your order in now. And I'd invite and be incredibly grateful for everyone to do that. It's actually a #1 bestseller on Amazon, which is great. And the early endorsements, I think, say it. To be honest, if you see the early endorsements from some incredible people, they all talk about how the book speaks to them, sings to them, guides them, invites them into a much, much, much deeper appreciation and relationship with themselves, as well as Gaia, as well as our entire universe. And what it does is it really brings existential meaning and evolutionary purpose into that whole story, that it wasn't just a series of random accidents. It was clearly, intelligently guided to enable this whole journey from hydrogen atoms to us. The hydrogen in the water in our bodies is literally as old as the universe. Yeah. The water overall in our bodies, half of it is older than our entire solar system. I mean, the sort of the little snippets along the way, I ended up I did end up in tears. At the end of the book, I was in such wonder and awe of our journey. And I mean, our journey because we are part of Gaia, our journey because we are part of our universe to this point, and the possibilities and the potential for us if we can wake up to remember we're inseparable. And that's what I hope the book helps people to do.
Perfect. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, Jude. If there was one thing that would make a significant difference for people, apart from buying the book, and we're going to include the links in the show notes, but what's that one thing that if you were to give people a suggested action that they take from listening to this podcast, what would that be for listeners?
Live the golden rule.
Yeah.
And live the platinum rule together.
Yeah.
And I mean that. I mean, that the golden rule is through virtually every spiritual tradition.
Yeah.
And people pontificate on it, and they talk about it, and they preach about it. Just live it.
Yeah.
Just live it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Jude, thank you so much for coming on our show and sharing your wisdom. I'm going to include all your links to your book and all the other links that you have. But what is the best way for people to get in contact with yourself?
Well, certainly to go to wholeworld-view.org website, because there's a lot of resources on that and articles and things. If people want to email me, I apologize in advance because I'm so busy. It may be a very quick response and quite a late response, but they can reach me at judecurrivan@gmail.com.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, look, Jude, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the links in the show notes and the link to your book as well. and definitely pre-order a copy if you're in Europe. We do have American listeners, so you can get your hands on the copy very quickly. Let's put it that way. Jude, thank you so much again for sharing your wisdom on our podcast. For our listeners, there is so much content contained in this particular episode. I encourage you to go back and replay the episode. I'm sure you will do many times because there's so much information contained in here. And perhaps, as Jude said, maybe it's about starting and making that decision to make that choice, first of all, of exploration, but also perhaps to start living the golden and the platinum rule, and be it, embody it, and go forward for that, because that's the evolution as what we're all a part of right now at the moment. If you want to find out more about ourselves and what we do in terms of discovering what your life purpose is and achieving personal mastery, head over to our website, www.paulwilliamdaves.com, and all the details are there and all the different ways of how you can get in contact with us. But until next time, I wish you every success.